Portland and its food scene are about to get some national attention on Top Chef. Seems like a pretty good time to check in on our local restaurants, see how they're doing.
It's still incredibly challenging.
And you know how the vaccines aren't 100% effective? I mean, some are pretty close, but it means that a small number of people might still catch COVID even after their shots. And based on a new report out of Washington, that number is really small. And we've been talking a lot about city-sanctioned homeless camps, so it got me thinking, how long do people usually stay in those?
As a community, we don't have places for people to go after shelter.
Here's the story.
Welcome. Thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Dan Haggerty. As we said, this is The Story. Thanks for being here. I've already said my name twice. I've already thanked you for being here twice. We've said the name of the show like 5 times. I think that about hits the quota. All the ways at the bottom of your screen to communicate with us. Use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. Let's get started. A couple questions for you tonight. Do you like food? Yes, of course you like food. Do you like delicious food? Well, yes, again. Do you like watching delicious food be prepared? You know, you look back and they're flipping it, and they're making it. I mean, who doesn't like that? I think everybody likes that. Now, do you like all of those things without being able to smell or taste the food while eating a frozen pizza with cheap wine on your couch in sweatpants? Well, then you're going to love the season premiere of Top Chef. Also, and more importantly, it was made in Portland over the past year. And this is a city that kind of needs some good pub right now. I mean, we're due for a win, you could say, especially our restaurant scene. Top Chef is a wildly successful show that's helped make people like Chef Gregory Gourdet from Departure a household name, and inspired foodies from around the world to view the Rose City as a dining destination. The show debuts tomorrow night on Bravo. And you may be asking yourself, debuts tomorrow night, you're looking at the calendar and you're going, well, when did they shoot it? Right? I don't remember a whole lot of fanfare or production trucks or celebrity sightings or anything like that. Well, Portland was pretty busy at the time. For a frame of reference, this was happening. Right. Of course, that was not all, if you remember, because as soon as the whole crew arrived, the sky started looking like this. Now, recently I came across an article by a journalist named Kate Arthur in Variety titled, "Inside the Unprecedented Effort to Film Top Chef Through COVID, Protests, and Wildfires." I was curious and reached out to Kate for an interview.
They planned for coronavirus. They were able to avoid the downtown area where the protests were happening, but the wildfires really messed them up in terms of their schedule.
What messed that up? Was it just because they had planned to do a lot of shooting outside and in some scenic areas to show off this area?
Exactly. I mean, it's such a beautiful landscape. You know, you couldn't step outside at all. And everyone was saying, don't go outside. And it was, the worst air quality in the world for a week or two, with the Trump administration kind of trashing the city, trashing Seattle, trashing Portland. They wanted to help. They wanted to help restore the image of the city. They love it there, so they wanted to show it for the beautiful city that it is.
Now, I don't produce reality TV shows, but if the plan was to show how beautiful the city was this summer, you probably would have to take some liberties with the word reality. I mean, those shows typically portray a city like it's on a red carpet. Meanwhile, people were seeing Portland at the time the way that the UPS driver sees you at 1 p.m. on your day off when you answer the door with a bedhead and a robe. Like, I don't always look like this.
Do you think they'll be successful in doing that? Because, of course, they are going to describe the atmosphere in which they were filming. So they are going to show and remind people of the protests and the level that they reached here in this city. Of course, everybody knows what it's been like to go through COVID. And then some of the ways they were looking to kind of show the beauty of this area, that got stolen by the wildfires. So I think some people are wondering, what will be the impression of this area when people are able to only see it from that lens of maybe when it was as bad as it got around here?
Yeah. I wonder, I don't know yet, because the season doesn't premiere until April 1st. I don't know exactly how they will address what was going on, whether they'll say at the start of a challenge, we were meant to do this outside, but we couldn't. I don't know whether they'll acknowledge that or whether it will seem far away.
Maybe tourists will feel like it was far away, like it happened a really long time ago. They can hardly remember. I know that's not the way it's going to feel for the people in this city, especially people who work in a restaurant or own one or owned one. I talked to the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association about the toll that COVID has taken now 6 months after Top Chef did come to town.
Before the pandemic hit, we had about 10,500 food service locations across the state. And our best guess is we have somewhere between 400 to 800 that have permanently closed. And then you have a whole nother swath of temporary closures. So those are restaurant owners that are trying to pick their time and place for when they open their doors back up. Maybe they're having a tough time swallowing the pill relating to, reduced capacity, or maybe they're having a harder time finding their workers again. Whatever the reason, there's still a healthy list of temporary closures. So it really depends how many of the temporary ones turn into permanent closures.
So on the bad end, 400 restaurants are closed permanently. And on the really, really bad end, it's going to be more like 800 or more. And the ones surviving now are doing so with half capacity in those restaurants at best. And they can't survive like that forever. It's dire. It is. But there are plans out there to help. Payroll assistance, massive grants aimed at restaurants, and TV shows. Top Chef makes people famous. It reminds people how special a good meal is, and hopefully that there are plenty of special places in this city to sit down for one.
What folks don't see as much is the level of emotion out there, the amount of suffering, the amount of tears. There's a lot of folks out there that have their life savings into these restaurant establishments. So this is a lot more than a business for them. It's people that are their family, and they're not related by blood, right? I mean, their workers and their teammates are their kind of living and breathing ecosystem, and all that's been washed away. And they have this chapter in their life. They have to decide if they're going to start a new concept like we were talking about earlier, or whether they're going to completely leave the industry.
Let's do some counting, shall we? Count every night, tell you how many people have gotten the vaccine in Oregon and Washington. This is Oregon. So more than 1,156,000 people have gotten that first dose of the vaccine. A majority of those people have actually gotten the second dose as well, but that number counts the people with at least one. And it puts us at 27% of the state's population with that first shot. In Washington, more than 2.1 million people have gotten their first dose of the vaccine, which works out to be 28% of Washington's population. Now, every night we show the numbers, and every night we get a bunch of questions from you about the vaccine, and every night we send them to Pat Doris for some answers.
Some interesting questions today. The first is from Jane, who says, are the first and second vaccines exactly the same medication? Jane, I thought the exact same thing when this stuff all started, and as it turns out, yes. If you get the Moderna, the second Moderna that you get, exactly the same as the first, and the same with Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson. There's only one. But yes, and the reason you're getting two, remember, is because it's getting your virus fighting mechanism in your blood up and ready to go. And the antibodies, when they recognize it the first time, they kind of build an army. And when it comes the second time, they're like, man, we are ready for you now. And they just go crazy. They don't really go crazy, but you know what I mean. They really expand. And so they found that the same combination, the same mixture works for the first and second dose. So excellent question. And yes, it is the same, but you're getting a second dose over time. And so your antibodies are fired up and ready to go. And this makes even more of them. The next question is from Mary. My sister-in-law in Washington reported her personal knowledge of a couple being fully vaccinated, people getting COVID after being fully vaccinated. Mary, I butchered your question, but what you're saying is that your sister told you that there were two people up in Washington who got vaccinated. It was 2 weeks after their second shots or whatever, and then they got COVID. You know what? It is happening. It is indeed. In fact, Washington State reported that there have been 102 breakthrough cases. That's what they call those things. I don't know why, but I guess the virus can break through after you've been vaccinated. There's been 102 since February 1st. About 1 million people, though, have been vaccinated. So the state of Washington tells us that is 0.01% of the vaccinated people. And remember, these vaccines are like 95% effective. Well, that 5%, those are the breakthroughs. Of those cases, most it was no big deal. 8, though, were hospitalized and 2 apparently died. Both those folks were 80 and had underlying conditions. But that is a little disturbing, isn't it? In Oregon, we have had 4 cases of breakthroughs. We reported on those in early to mid-February. The state told us that there were 2 cases in Lane County and then 2 cases also in Yamhill County. The other question that I have to deal with today is, where was your head yesterday, Pat Doris, when you were telling us about ratios of people being vaccinated in counties? I said that the numbers were, it was a certain number of people per 100,000 for the county, and a lot of you are much better statisticians than I am, and you knew immediately that could not be right. And so I apologize. You are right. I was in a hurry, although that's no excuse. I got the number wrong. It was a certain number of people per 10,000 that lived in the county. So I'm sorry about that mistake. And thank you so much for being a safety net and pointing that out very effectively and vociferously, I might say. But we do appreciate you. Please keep those questions and comments coming. We really like it. That's what's going on with the COVID vaccine today.
All right, Pat, thank you so much. Now, we've been talking a lot about this controversial zoning change proposal that would let city-sanctioned homeless camps and shelters open up in many more parts of the city of Oregon. Now, the city council was supposed to vote on this today, but instead they voted on some amendments after a lot of people were concerned about certain parts of this. They were concerned that camps would be allowed to set up in city parks. Well, they have clarified that language. So now, under this proposal, camps and shelters can't be set up in city parks, not in natural resource areas like wetlands and forests and floodplains. They will also only be allowed in paved areas. Now, we're going to let you know how council votes on this entire thing when they finally vote. But I wanted to learn a little bit more about how these types of camps and shelters work, which, to be clear, again, are run by agencies and nonprofits approved by the city. These aren't just those informal groups of tents that you see set up in a park or set up on a sidewalk. So I talked to Dennis Thurall with the Joint Office of Homeless Services about how long people usually stay in these kinds of temporary housing.
The stays have gone up in the last couple of years. You know, it can be, a couple of months is a fairly average stay. Some folks stay much longer. Some folks, they're just there for a couple of days until they get some assistance or they can go somewhere else that's better for them. But, some folks are there for many, many months. For families, that stay can be several months long. It's hard to find affordable apartments that can hold a larger family. That's a real barrier sometimes. Housing costs generally are a barrier right now. That's the thing about shelter. It's not housing. And we still, as a community, we don't have places for people to go after shelter. So even if we added a lot more shelter, we'd have a lot more folks who are, yes, out of the elements, but they'd still be experiencing homelessness, and we still wouldn't have housing for them all.
Who are unemployed, for instance, there are certain things that you do during that unemployment to kind of show that you're actively looking for employment. When somebody is staying at one of these year-round shelters, what do they have to do or show to prove that they are trying to help find themselves permanent housing, along with some of the efforts being done by the volunteers and workers?
I mean, there's not a requirement that you have to participate. We want folks, number one, to be out of the elements and off of the streets and somewhere safe. But they do engage once they're there. So that's the thing. It's a lower barrier space. If we create a lot of barriers, we used to have a higher barrier shelter system, and people didn't want to come inside. They wanted to stay outside because of that reason. So we have to balance that. We don't want folks to choose to stay outside because it's hard to stay in a shelter. We want to make shelter work for those folks.
Now, we all know homelessness has been a huge problem in the metro area for years, but we don't know really how much of an impact the pandemic has had on it. How much worse has it gotten? That's because Multnomah County hasn't done a homeless point-in-time count since 2019. At that point in time, more than 4,000 people were experiencing homelessness, which was actually slightly down overall from previous years. But of that number, more than 2,000 people were considered unsheltered, meaning they were basically the people who you see sleeping outside in tents. And that was the highest number of unsheltered people ever recorded in the county. This is a group of people who would be most helped by these city-sanctioned shelters and camps. Now, until we get the more recent data, we're just going to have to look at estimates. And last year, Columbia University made an estimate. They predicted between a 40 and 45% rise in homelessness nationwide by the end of 2020. We're going to keep you posted on when we get an update, point-in-time count for the metro area.
Our country and our city have been talking about police reform for almost a year now, and it's important we keep echoing why.
And that was my first encounter, and again, I was about 11, 12 years old.
And once again, downtown is graced by the cherry blossoms. I know you've seen them, but do you know the history behind them? When the story continues.
So during commercial breaks, I step right over there. There's a little table. I got my phone there. And I'll look through all the Twitter feeds and comments and emails and stuff like that. And then I read a few at the end of the show. So if you have something to say, go ahead and reach out. Use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. Email us at thestory@kgw.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I'm everywhere. Just look me up, send me something, and we'll talk. Now, a question for you to think about tonight. How old were you during your first encounter with law enforcement? How old were you the first time that a police officer pulled a gun on you? Now, for many people, myself included, the answer to that second one is never. Now, if you're a black man, you might have answered it differently. It's a subject of a town hall meeting hosted by Portland City Commissioner Jo Ann Hardesty. And black men from Portland, they gathered on Zoom to talk about their experiences with Portland police. For many of them, it happened when they were very young, and it was traumatic. Like Ashanti, who was 14 when police were called on him while he was waiting for a friend in his backyard.
So I'm just chilling in his backyard, just waiting for him. And like, I don't even know what I was doing. I'm just hanging out on a little chair back there. And I hear a bunch of commotion from the front of the house. I'm like, so what's all this? So I start going toward the front of the house, and the first thing I see is a bunch of cops with their guns pointed at me, cussing and yelling, get the F down, get the F down, get down now, get down now. I'm just like, whoa, like a bunch of cops. The whole front of the yard, the whole front of the house is covered up with cops. Like, and I'm just like, so I get on the ground. They lay me on the ground. They put their knee in my back, and which is what kind of scared me when I saw the George Floyd stuff. Because I was like, man, I had my knee in my back like that more than once.
It's a conversation that's been going on for a long time. Of course, we've had it a lot over this past year. Really came to the forefront. You heard him mention it there with the death of George Floyd last year, especially now that the officer who kneeled on George Floyd, Derek Chauvin, goes on trial. The men who spoke during this town hall, they say that George Floyd, as you just heard, or Tamir Rice or Philando Castile, these men who spoke said that those men could have very easily been them.
The officers told him I looked like a drug dealer. I had new sneakers, and my hat was too low over my eyes. That made me look suspicious, and that's why I was pulled over. Ironically, we were both like seminary students at the time.
A lot of men who spoke had similar stories. So it was kind of story after story. They sounded very similar. They were young preteens or young teens when they had the first time that they had the police called on them for things like riding their bikes or for throwing rocks in the neighborhood. And many of them had guns drawn on them or were held for hours without their parents. Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler was at that meeting, and he acknowledged that the policing in Portland needs to evolve. Portland Commissioner Jo Ann Hardesty says elected leaders need to hear from the people most affected by policing before the city decides to invest in the Bureau. The city's been in negotiations with the Portland Police Association since January to talk about those investments, and a lot of people have been asking for changes to be made. The current police contract expires in June, so a new one will need to be approved before then. We'll let you know what happens. Hey, so did you get outside today? Beautiful. Amazing, wonderful day. I'm not a weather person, but I believe it got over 70 in some areas. Pretty warm for the end of March, I would say. The cherry blossoms on the Portland waterfront, they are out. They're in full bloom. They look gorgeous. So check those out if you haven't seen them. And there's actually a pretty interesting history behind those trees. See, they were a gift from Japan for the dedication of the Japanese American Historical Plaza in 1990. It's right next to Old Chinatown, which was also known as Japantown. A lot of Japanese immigrants lived and worked in that area before World War II. But during the war, 120,000 Japanese Americans were sent to internment camps, including about 4,000 from here, from Oregon. The plaza tells the story of these hardships through poems, sculptures, and of course, the cherry blossom tree. Our photojournalist, Kurt Austin, went to check out the flowers in full bloom.
It's extraordinary. It's just so peaceful and happy and joyous.
You know, cherry blossoms are one of the wonders of nature. I thought I had to go to Japan to see them, but we are so lucky that we are right here in Portland to see them in full bloom.
They're gorgeous, and we love the people that they attract.
What an amazing sight.
Love it.
Yeah, it's a war memorial. It's awesome.
Just coming here to people watch is so enjoyable, and all the photo shoots.
Extremely relaxing. The sun is out, beautiful scenery, and what more can you ask for after this 1 year of COVID, right?
Serene.
It's very serene.
And seeing everyone out, and everyone's out social distance too, which is just, it feels like Portland.
Man, I needed that. How about you? Send us your emails, comments. Use that hashtag #HeyDan. I'm going to take a little nap. I'll see you after the commercial break. Welcome back. It is the last day of March, which means it's almost the end of March Madness, which is on right now. Did you know that? But more importantly, it's almost the end of the KGW Great Food Drive. This is the last week to donate, and so many of you have donated already that I'm probably not breaking any news to you. You guys have been killing it. It's amazing. We've raised enough money for more than 3 million pounds of food so far. Now, you might be wondering, that sounds like a lot, but what exactly does that mean? Like, how many people does that much food actually feed? Well, we did the math, and 3 million pounds of food translates to 2.5 million meals, which is a lot of food for a lot of families in a time where a lot of people need that help. So a huge thanks to everyone who has donated. You've been leaving a lot of great comments along with your donations as well. I wanted to read a few of them now, like this one from Connie, who said, donating part of my stimulus check to help others. What a nice gesture. Someone left a comment with an anonymous donation saying, I know what it's like to struggle, so I want to help when I can. And Meredith said, I hope these donations are spread across Oregon, not just used in the metro area. And there's good news, okay? They are. The money here, it goes to the Oregon Food Bank, right? Which then spreads the donations to 1,400 food pantries across the area in Oregon and Southwest Washington. Now, like I said, this is the last week to donate, and here's an easy way. If you're at Safeway, for instance, this week, you can make a donation right at the checkout with the pin pad. You can also go to kgw.com/food drive to donate. And if you need food assistance, and we've done so many stories, there are more people in need of assistance now than ever before in this area. So a lot of people out there need help. And if you're one of them, there's info for you on there as well. All this week, the Jordan Schnitzer and Harold and Arlene Schnitzer Care Foundation will match the first $10,000 donated. Also, we want to thank Pacific Foods, local Toyota dealers, Rivermark Community Credit Union, and Safeway for supporting the food drive. They help make sure that this happens and goes as well as it has. So thank you so much for being with us tonight. Getting a lot of comments about the flowers. What are they called, Laurel? Why am I blanking on it? The cherry blossom.
On the waterfront.
You know, the huge story we just played like 2 minutes ago. Oh my gosh. I was saying the other day, what a week. And somebody said, Dan, it's Wednesday. So that's kind of the way I'm living life right now. I'm sure you can relate. That's the story for tonight. Thank you so much for being with us. Keep using that hashtag #HeyDan. Let us know what you want to see covered in your community.